How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Agave and Cactus Talk. Today we're going to be talking about some of the new trees we've been adding. And, we've been aiming to continue with the drought-tolerant fruit trees and drought-tolerant leguminous trees. And they both present various benefits to growing agave or cactus. Mainly the trees are kind of how we were describing in the past podcasts with the columnar cactus, growing vertically either into a level 2 or level 3 canopy tree that could provide some shade down under and be trimmed, in winter thoroughly to allow sunlight to still hit the ground, but still provide some shading and some protection from frost and cold and some of the wind, right? So these little microclimates I'm finding out are perfect for starting agave and cactus seed and bugel and, some of the youngest plants I may be putting out into the field that may only be 4 or 5 inches tall, right? So I want to have more and more of these little microclimates because I can start the small plants, the medium and larger plants. I can plant right next door to them and they live off of the, rainwater that I'm adding to those fruit or leguminous trees. And they are, prospering in various ways, right? So I always make sure to keep my trees nicely trimmed, obviously, so that they're participating in that silviculture that I have on the farm, which is, once again, growing a whole bunch of trees with the intention of feeding them to your livestock, right? So in my case, it's the goats, and whatever trees I'm selecting to add or into the landscape, the ecosystem farm, are always going to be trees that can not hinder agave or cactus, grow in tandem right next to it, and provide a supplemental crop or supplemental benefits for the agave and cactus, right? And a lot of these trees, for instance, the pink lady apple or the Chinese Mormon apricot, they're not trees that we will be, for instance, putting thousands of, right, or hundreds of, like a normal fruit orchard. But I give the example of how I'd like to incorporate them, right? My main stuff from the farm may be agave and cactus, and I may be selling, for instance, cactus fruits or agave, say as a food crop or as a beverage, right? Well, a lot of these, fruits and stuff, say from the apricots or the apples, they're mainly to be providing food for me and my family, and any excess could obviously be sold in the same system where you're selling your crop, right? So say if you have a CSA or some type of weekly delivery of, your crops to clients around you, it's something that you can, include in, a temporary basis while the stock goes away, right? And that's just an extra little additional revenue for a small farm, but it also fulfills the goal of not buying it yourself, right? So if I don't have to buy apples and apricots and figs and, olives, I press my own olive oil, I save lots of money a year, and I eat very healthy, right? So I'm getting higher quality stuff that's in the store, and I'm getting, lots of savings, which is basically putting money back in my wallet, right? So it's like, not only do the trees make me money, say, through a potential, through the Palo Verde selling the vines, or through the fruit trees selling fruits, right? But they can save me money because I'm not purchasing that stuff, which means that money can be spent somewhere else on the farm right? Which is always great. So look at it in those two ways, right? Saving and then making money. But a lot of these trees also allow you different options, right? So it's like in the case of, say, the mesquite trees, right? They produce edible bean pods. Sure, I could sell those as a supplemental source of income. But now I can, like growing the cactus with the agave and combining them into a fermented beverage, wine or spirit. I can do the same thing with the Palo Verde or the mesquite seed pods and put them into a ferment and distill them together, right? So I would love to make a mesquite-infused agave spirit or a mesquite-infused cactus wine. Lots of possibilities there, you know. So I'll go, I guess, through the list of trees first that I've been adding, and then I'll talk individually about each one and some of its pluses and minuses, I guess, right? So I added, or me and my girlfriend Nori, we added these trees to the farm in January since the new year. So far, we've got 16 trees, and the goal is to put 60 trees this year. So well on the way to the goal. Made a modest goal of 60. Hopefully, if everything goes well, we could plant 100, right? But we have a short time where we can plant. So, you know, we can only really plant from January through April. So we have 4 months that we can plant before the soil starts losing most of its moisture. It starts becoming really hot, right? And we really want to plant all the way up to March. Like April is like a last stand, you know, like we really don't want to be planting in April, but if we have to, we can kind of do it and try to just irrigate with a little bit of rainwater to establish those plants. But it's not something I like to do. I like nature to pretty much do the bulk of the work, and if I can get, you know, agave, cactus, or trees in from January to March, and they're drought-tolerant species, they'll establish, you know, through the winter and spring, and then by summer, they already have some nice root systems, and with a little supplemental water in the first year, they'll make it, and but most of the time, they don't even need my help or supplemental water, and they'll make it. But there's some species the first year I have to water them, and then, you know, pretty much after that first cycle, they're established, and I don't have to touch them very much anymore, ever, unless I have extra water to give them, right? But it's not a requirement. So, going back to the list of trees, we've gotten in some Chinese Mormon apricots, gotten in some mystery figs. Not sure what type of fig they are, because, you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of figs, not subspecies, but they're cultivars that people have brought out, right? So not sure which fig this is. When it fruits, I'll have a much better idea. And these fruit trees we've been putting were 15 gallons. You know, if you ever need some well-priced, affordable fruit trees in the LA area, planted, let me know. You know, I'm a gardener, so I can go plant them for you. But this nursery here in Lake Los Angeles, Landas, is run by my homie, and he gives really good prices on the fruit trees. So a lot of these trees he was selling, you know, for $60 each, right? So say in LA or Home Depot area nurseries, a lot of those 15-gallon fruit trees can already be $150 to $200. So, you know, if you still want some early 2000s prices on fruit trees, hit up my boy at Landas Nursery in Lake Los Angeles, right there off 170th Street. Gotta plug your homies, you know? You gotta plug the homies. But you know, here's always a piece of advice too, right? It's like, why do I pick up trees from this guy? Yes, they're affordable. That's one of the reasons. But two, he grows all the trees there, right? And a lot of the flowers are herbs he may be bringing in from larger nurseries, but most of the trees he grows from very small there himself. And then these trees already have taken the cold, the wind, the heat of the Mojave Desert, this high desert region. So it's already taken 14 Fahrenheit. It's already taken, 2 weeks of frost. It's already taken 40 mile per hour winds throughout the whole year, all the time, 2-3 times a week. It's already taken drought tolerant, because he tells me the water is really expensive in the area. I wouldn't know because I capture it all, so, I don't pay city water. But every time I talk to somebody in the area here in Lancaster or Palmdale, Lake Los Angeles, High Vista, where I farm, they always say anywhere in the Antelope Valley, the water is super expensive, right? So a lot of people have shown me that they are paying, for a small household, sometimes $200-$300, $400 a month for water. In a household like that, say, would probably be paying 30 to 50% less just south of the LA forest, right, in the San Gabriel Valley, or, in, urban Los Angeles area, right, west LA, all those areas. So, because there's less water in the desert, it's more expensive, right? So he tells me a lot of his trees are very drought tolerant because he doesn't water them very much because the water is so expensive, right? So that's one funny thing, but so that is basically the second reason, right? So because the trees are already accustomed to my area, I can go pick up a tree there and know that they don't have to have a shock period. So I used to have this error all the time where I'd go to LA, buy super beautiful trees, bring them out here, and they'd immediately go through a huge shock, which meant that, a large majority of them would just succumb before they ever had a chance to prosper. Because from straight out the gate, they're like, bro, I've never been in some crazy climate like this, LA gets way more water, Pasadena, Altadena get way more water, never drops under 40. We do get extreme hot. Sometimes Altadena could be 5-6 degrees hotter. It'll be like 112 here in High Vista and 119 or 118 in Altadena, and I'm like, what the fuck? But the cold, it never drops under 40 over there. So the plants here, I can never ever successfully transfer something from the LA region here in winter or summer. Even if I were to irrigate it madly, like if it was on an automated, like in a garden sprinkler system or bubbler or whatever, drip line, right? It's not impossible, but it just will never do well, right? And what I would do to get over that was put them in my shade houses, put them outdoors sometimes, and put them indoors other times, so that slowly they get accustomed, right? So if you're ordering trees, potted trees, from your nurseries that are keeping them in greenhouses, keeping them, in really Goldilocks scenarios, like I like to call it, then you have to have a cool down period or a acclimatization period of probably 3 to 6 months, where you don't even want to put it in your full exposure until it's taken all of your extremes a little bit, So it's like, now by buying trees and stuff from local nurseries, now that I know more, and I'm growing it all myself, a lot of these fruit trees, then I can guarantee that they're going to live here very well. Because from young, they get weeded out if they're not going to make it. And a lot of that happens at the nursery stage. So then, when I'm buying from a nursery, they only have trees that have made it. So, but anyways, yeah, so Chinese apricot, we got some mystery fig, we got Chilean Mesquite, we got the Punko, which is what the Mexicans, like my dad, call the Mexican Palo Verde. And the Mexican Palo Verde is very different to the Arizona Palo Verde. I'll get into that right now. But then we've also planted some sevillano olive trees and some mission olive trees. And, you know, a lot of these trees all are very, very drought tolerant. The fruit trees may require a little bit more water, but I'm planting them very, very close to a lot of the agave and cactus, putting a lot of them surrounding them by it, so that those agave and cactus, whatever water they're maintaining, the fruit trees could be sharing some of that water with them when it's in a dry farm setting. But then we also have put a pink lady apple tree. So I'll go through each of these and talk about how, you know, why I like all of them and why they're beneficial, I guess, for an agave or cactus farm, right? So the first one we'll talk about is the fig tree, right? So the fig tree is a evergreen tree, or deciduous tree, which is great because right now in winter I need a little bit more sun on my plants, right? It's really cold. I want them to get some heat, right? So the figs will drop all their leaves, and then, you know, when it starts warming back up again in spring and summer, they'll bring back their leaves, which is when I actually wish I could be shade tarp and everything, but it's just logistically not very economically feasible. You know, can't shade tarp the whole farm, but I wish I could sometimes in farm or in summer, right? But these fig trees, they're going to produce me some nice figs every year, right? Only once a season, or one season, which in my area is usually going to be, you know, May through June, usually in May, because once the plant's established, it knows that the heat's really coming in June and July, so it doesn't really want to get in there like it would in the LA area, where sometimes temperatures may be milder, right? But still, that's great because a lot of the cacti are late spring and early summer as well, which means that I could be selling the figs alongside a lot of my cacti fruit. Now, it's probably 50% of the cacti fruit will come out, at least from the puntias in spring and in summer, mostly early spring through early summer. But there's also another 50% that will come out in late spring through late summer, right? So that's great because the figs will be at the early side, which is usually a little bit less of the plants that I have, just population-wise. So the majority of my fruit may be in late spring, early summer, right? Or no, sorry, late spring through late summer. So when I have a little bit less cactus fruit, I'll have some figs to supplement, you know, my diet, family's diet, and the farm's diet, right? The making money diet. But figs also are notorious when they're not sprayed, and I'm going to be growing them, you know. This really should be one word for everything, but, you know, it's ridiculous you have to say all the words, right? It's like in an organic permaculture system, right? But to me, growing it with no chemicals, no chill, all that, it's better than a regenerative system. I call it, you know, the traditional indigenous system, knowledge system, right? So the tech system. And this ecosystem farming, way better, you know. But yeah. The point being, when you are growing figs that way, you're gonna have sometimes little worms or little pests inside of your figs, right? Sometimes if the temperatures are right, the humidity is right, you may have those little insects, and you don't want to consume those, right? Or I mean, honestly, it probably wouldn't be the worst thing, like probably no issues to humans. Here's a funny story. One time, my my homie, we were on a gardening job, and he was eating all these figs off a client's tree, just random, and then I said, oh, let me get one, and I opened it because I always open the figs, and I always check for these little pests, and I open it, and I see a bunch of little worms, and I show it to him, and he's like, bro, I ate like 40 of those, and I'm like, bro, you gotta check your figs. Nothing happened to him, but he was just disgusted, didn't want to continue eating them. But sometimes that's just that. I tell you that as a story because, again, nothing happened to him. It probably was just extra fucking protein, to be honest, with the worms, with the little insect or pest or whatever. But humans don't see it that way. They're going to be like, this is not good to eat. I'm going to get sick. So you can't sell that shit, right? But that's where the goats and the chickens and the fucking geese and the quail come in, right? You can feed those figs that are not market, I wouldn't say ready. How would you say? They're not up to market beauty standards. You can just give that shit to your animals. And then they have a healthy figs going into their diet, right? The figs also are a crop that you could sell dried throughout the whole year because they don't require, or they don't require, they spoil quickly, right? So you have to sell them really locally, which is why there's not a lot of fig fruit sales around the world, because by the time they reach their destination, they would be destroyed, unless they invent some shit like they did with bananas. Bananas always amaze me because the fresh, amazing bananas, like some shit from Guatemala, dude, 3-4 days, it's already like lost peak maturity. The fact that bananas could be transported worldwide just shows how much we've advanced in agricultural chemicals and stuff, but not necessarily like it amazes me that they could get a banana to go to the supermarket and it looks good there. But that also is like, that's where like me knowing a little bit about chemicals, I'm like, wow, that's really not good. How did they do that? And a lot of the stuff that they spray on bananas is really horrible for humans. So, grow your own bananas, but grow your own figs too, right? But anyways, these figs, you could dehydrate them, like me and Nori just bought a dehydrator, right? And I used to have one in Altadena, but it burned down. But then what I used to do with the loquats, the figs, all these fruits that spoil quickly, you dehydrate them, and then you can eat them throughout the whole year as dehydrated fruit. Which also means, say, when your cactus fruits run out, right, or you don't have agave to sell that are ready, then you can sell some of these fruits that you've dried throughout the year, and that also means you can eat figs throughout the year, all of that, right? So figs is a very drought-tolerant tree. Once established, like if you could get figs past the first 2 to 3 years, they're fucking golden, dude. I would recommend planting it if in a really harsh environment like here, from 15 gal up, a lot of the fruit trees, because it's just a tough climate, man, and especially if you're dry farming. If you're irrigating, you can get away with a lot of 5 gal crap, 1 gal crap. But if you're going to dry farm, don't even waste your money. Only get 5, 10, and 15 gallon. And really some, if you're going to get 5, they got to be extremely rooted. But anyways, yeah, those figs, very drought tolerant, extremely cold tolerant. I think a lot of those figs can take down to anywhere from 10 to, actually probably anywhere from 5 to 20 Fahrenheit of a cold low tolerance, right? So I'm at, most years, the worst is 20. We haven't dropped under 20 yet this year. But the extreme years, so say 1 out of every 5 or every 10 years, we may get a 14 or an 18 several days. So I'm cool with the figs. And I mentioned that too because say you have a similar occasion where most of your winters every year are 20 Fahrenheit. But then you have every 5 to 10 years, 1 year, that may be 0 Fahrenheit. You have to take that into account for your trees. It's not the average low winter temperatures. It's the average historic low temperatures that you have to really look out for that could kill your trees, right? And the bigger the tree is, the better they can take those storms and stuff. But, you know, you really just want to avoid it from the beginning. So plant shit that will be able to take your extremes. So figs fell into that. They're all cool with that. The wind, we have a lot of wind here, which is great because figs sometimes look really ugly when they're dropping all their leaves. Here, that's not an issue. One little wind comes and drops all the leaves, you know. So also giving me lots of mulch, and you know, when I put the goats in there, you know, they're eating some of those leaves too, right? So the fig trees, a lot of these fig trees will have up to a 10 to 25 foot height in canopy. So, you know, make sure to trim it nice because they can form some really beautiful trunks and branches. And, you know, one thing I really loved about trimming trees was the art behind it, you know. Like, I remember one time this one guy, I asked him, I was like, why'd I get the job for this, for these trees right here, you know? I was more expensive than the other guy that quoted me. So I had done some trees on this property before, and he liked them. And then this other guy came in a little bit cheaper that was actually one of my homies who I brought in and tried to scalp me, or backdoor me, as they call it in construction, which is like you bring them in to like help you on the job, and then the guy ends up trying to take a job from you, you know, by giving quotes for the next job. Instead of, you know, you gotta be watchful with who you hire always, you know. You don't want people stealing from your fucking plate, you know. But especially when you're fucking putting dinner on their plate. But anyways, besides the point. He told me, the property owner, he said, Steve, you make the trees look like art, you know? And I was like, well, what do you mean, you know? And he's just like, when you leave, the trees look like they should be in a museum and be an art piece. And I, you know, after that guy told me that was early in my career, I started thinking about trees a lot like that, you know, like, I remember I did some tree work for a lady, and, you know, I trimmed the tree in a way where she could put all these crazy ornaments and make it a really, like she lived in Marina Del Rey in a really small space, and she had like maybe a 20 by 20 foot garden. So she wanted to put a whole bunch of cool decorations and Christmas lights and all these cool things, but she didn't really have like a huge outdoor garden, right? So she had this one tree, and I'm like, you know, it was just a ficus, like it looked like a big old lollipop, you know, like I've been keeping it nice and trimmed. And then I told her, let me open it up, and I'm gonna open it to where it looks amazing. You can see all the branches and the trunks, and then I'm gonna push it high, and then you can use all these trunks and all these branches to put all your ornaments and all your decorations. I'll hang it all for you. And man, this tree came out so beautiful, you know. But it started making me think differently because I was like, wow, like a nicely trimmed tree could be an art installation. You know what I mean? But yeah, anyways, I was just trying to say how the figs could be very beautifully trimmed, like artistic pieces. And most trees could be like that, but there's certain trees that just really, really look amazing, like the figs, the olives, that give these amazing architecturally beautiful trunks, right? Like now you see a lot of companies just like the palms, like you know, all these rich people think like their trees have been there forever. Nah, us landscapers come in, they got a fucking blank slate, and they want 2 80-foot fucking date palms in their front yard, so it looks architecturally amazing, and then another 2 olives at the entrance of their driveway, so it like when you show up, you're like, damn, a fucking boss lives here. I don't know what they're thinking when they install it or why they do it, but They want it. And we just show up and boop, 100-year-old olive, boop, 80-year-old fucking date tree installed by crane. One day, baby. The rich people, they don't wait for their trees. They just whoop, put it right there. I remember I was doing this one installation one time in Bel Air, and then, you know, I asked this lady, I was like, oh, you want me to go get some 5 and 15 gal, you know, trees? You can put a whole bunch, like you got a giant slate here, you know? And she's like, oh, no. I'm like, I don't got the time for that. She was like 80. She's like, yeah, like, I really would just like to visit a mature tree nursery. And up until that point, I didn't even know what the fucking mature tree nursery was. This was early in my landscaping career. And I told her, all right, let's go. And, you know, there's these nurseries, you know, that you can go to. And they have anywhere from a 20 to a fucking 150-year-old tree, you know? You want a fully grown dragon tree, for instance, like you see in the fucking wild on Madagascar. Boom, you can get it. You want a fucking 100-foot pine tree. Boom, you can get it. You know, and one of those companies, that's a really great company, I'll plug them right here, is Senna Tree Company in Los Angeles. Senna Tree Company. Say you got 120-foot pine tree. You don't want to chop it down. You want this motherfucker to keep living its long life, right? They'll come and take it out, right? So you can pay them. They'll come and take it out, recycle it, put it in their yard, and then a landscaper like me will show up with a client later on, a few years down the line, a couple months down the line, and be like, boom, I want that tree in my front yard. And they'll come, boom, when a client, put it in there, right? They're also hella cool because, see, like in Japan, every big construction project, trees in the way, they move them all. I wish there was 100 Senna Tree Company, you know, relocating every single giant cactus and perennial like trees and shit through construction projects in the USA, and we just put them everywhere, you know? That'd be amazing. Because we really shouldn't be cutting down, like, for instance, they put in, I'm sure when they put in the 10 or whatever, whew, imagine all the cactus and saguaros and shit they cut down, you know? Now I've actually seen that a lot of those saguaros, as they're endangered, they're saving them when they do those construction projects, and, you know, they have to avoid areas and stuff. So that's great, but, you know, not everywhere has that liberty. Like, so many trees, imagine how many are taken out. But, yeah, it's so cool, these and you can just come and install a giant tree like that by crane, right? But, anyways, yeah, I don't know how I got on that. I was getting distracted. But, so the fig trees, amazing fucking trees, right? They can provide your little microclimate for your agave and cactus, and, you know, the deciduous trees like that are perfect because when, you know, you have, more need for sunlight on your plants, right? They're going to be able to do it, and when you need less, they're going to be able to do it without you even touching it for a minute. The other one like that is going to be, obviously, the pink lady apple that I was telling you about. So apple trees, apricots, all the stone fruits, they're also deciduous like that. So they'll be able to give some shade to your plants summer, winter, they'll be able to give more sunlight. So try to think of trees like that and think of how they could, you know, better your ecosystem for the ground cover plants that you're trying to grow, right? So, and they can even influence other stuff, right? Because say you got a 20-foot tall fig tree, right? You could plant a fucking date tree under it, and it'll pop up above the fig tree, right? But the fig tree allows the date tree to grow up successfully. You get me? And then the date tree, once it surpasses the fig tree, will start helping the fig tree grow more successfully. It's like, you know, nature, everybody sees this competition, right? But in plants, there's a lot of symbiosis, which is just the fancy word for saying they work together. So yeah, next plant, right? The Chinese Mormon apricot. I had never heard of this one. I went to the nursery here, Landa's, and I seen with Nori a whole bunch of different apricots, and some of them were, like why I chose Chinese Mormon apricot was because it was around 10 to 20 degrees more cold hardy than the other 4 or 5 subspecies or cultivars of apricots, right? And these are cultivars people have made, their backyards, all types of shit, right? Like, one of the most popular avocado varieties right now, I don't remember if it's Fuerte, but it came out literally from like a fucking backyard in Altadena. Like somebody started it and it was like an amazing avocado, and then some guy took it to like, I'm unsure if it was UC Davis or some other institution, and they fucking blew it up, right? So people think all this innovation is just happening at UC Davis or institutions like that. And a lot of the time, the fruit trees, the best cultivars, I'd fucking bet on a backyard breeder over Davis any day. No offense to my homies at Davis. Most of those fuckers are the backyard breeders, funnily enough. The issue usually a lot there is that a backyard breeder, say even if he works for UC Davis, in his backyard he has no limitations on what he can study or research, or he has no corporate influence or wealthy donor influence or UC Regents influence over his work. So, yeah, a lot of the backyard breeders, I bet on them any day. But anyways, Chinese Mormon apricot, like I said, 10 to 15 degrees, 20 degrees more cold hardy than most varieties. So it's cold hardy to negative 20 to negative 30 Fahrenheit. And a lot of the other apricots were only negative 10 or negative 15 cold hardy, right? But here's the fun or the interesting part. Most of them, this is one thing I wish trees would be starting to list, right? That I include on agave and cactus sheets that I give to clients. Heat hardiness, right? Because I'm sure not every single apricot takes 115 the same, right? So we'll see how heat hardy this Chinese apricot is, right? Or Chinese Mormon apricot, right? Not so sure on that. But generally, all the stone fruits that I grew in Altadena had hit 119 Fahrenheit, including Santa Rosa plum, which was bred here in Santa Rosa, California, to be a fucking drought-tolerant beast. The Double Delight nectarine, right? Fucking amazing one that was bred. Also was very drought and heat hardy in Altadena. In Altadena, I'm not sure if we ever hit 120 Fahrenheit, but definitely 118, 119 I measured myself. So everything I had there was super heat hardy. Other stone fruits, yeah, the apricots, the peaches actually, take that back. A lot of those peaches were not extremely heat hardy. I had tons of fucking disease problems with them. So I'm not sure if they were the peaches that I were choosing, but a lot of those peaches, whenever the heat came around, is when they started getting the most insects and getting really fucked up with blight. So, once again, probably the cultivars I was choosing, but peaches, at least I didn't have luck with in Altadena. And Altadena, at least on the heat, is very, very similar to High Vista. So, Chinese apricot, we shall see how heat hardy it is, but most of the stone fruits will have no problem with the wind and the cold, right, that is in this area. Pear blossom. So pear blossom right here up against the LA forest, right? So that forest, when you're coming north, as soon as you start dropping, pearl blossom right there, right? And right there, traditionally, they grew a lot of stone fruits, different stone fruits, in the early 1900s. And that's why they gave that name pear blossom to the city, right? Because they grew so much pears. So I've been thinking of growing some pears out here too, because I had kefir pear, which was very sweet in Altadena, and those were extremely drought tolerant, heat hardy, and they're very cold tolerant too. So I gotta try to find some affordable kefir pears, because once again, it's like I gotta find them in LA. I can find any fruit tree, but man, are they expensive in some places. They be trying to just, they're crackheads, man. I'm not gonna be paying them $300 for a fucking 5-gallon fruit tree. But anyways, so Chinese apricot, Mormon apricot, very fast growing apricot, very drought tolerant, and but one other thing that attracted me to this specific type of apricot, this is why you got to look up every tree that you plant. I know I'm going off on a lot of tangents here, but I mean, if you're this far into the podcast, you already know how I am. But so this apricot, it has one of the latest blooms for apricots, which means a lot of the times it avoids the bad frost, right? That may come in the later part of winter or early spring. So that's great for my area, because we have that exact problem of late frost sometimes. So, I avoid that issue by choosing this apricot. The other thing is that this is a self-pollinating variety, which means I don't need another fucking apricot to grow alongside these apricots, right? So you also want to see if your trees are self-pollinating or not, because you don't want to be choosing a tree, for instance. Say I chose a different apricot that wasn't self-pollinating. I'd have to have another 2 trees next to it within, wind bloom or wind pollination distance, or, within a couple dozen of feet, right, like 10 to 20 feet. That way I can have them cross-pollinate each other, right? But that just creates a lot more trees that you need to put, a lot more money, and it needs a lot more pollinators, right? So think of, my homies that got bees here in California. A lot of people think beekeepers make most of their money off the honey. It's like they rent their bees out to fruit and nut farmers for pollination services, and many of them make fucking millions of dollars renting those bees out, right? And good for them. We need bees and shit. But the point is, if you need plants that are going to be cross-pollinating or aren't self-fertile, then you need a lot of pollinators. And you're going to have to pay for that if they're not available in your area, right? Or you're going to have to pay to plant ground cover that is going to give you those pollinators, right? So, all very good considerations to take when you're fucking choosing a fruit tree, because even if you just want, say, an apricot, there's so many different cultivars, right? And you got to choose the apricot that is going to be the best for you, right? So here I have a lot of wind, right? So even if I didn't have a self-fertile apricot, I really wouldn't worry too much about the cross-pollination, because I know the wind's going to do that by itself, I'm not even going to need the pollinators. But in a lot of places, they don't got no wind like that, 40-mile-an-hour shit all the time, which means you're going to need some pollinators. So, it's different, Make sure you're choosing the right tree. But this Chinese Mormon apricot, also, I still haven't tried the fruit, but when I looked it up, it said that these fruits are sweet pits, which means they're not super tough pits that, will break your fucking teeth if you bite into them. You can actually consume them. And this is kind of interesting for me, because we always talk about how the agave and cactus seed is the most nutritional, or the cactus seed is the most nutritional part of the cactus per density of nutrients, So, to me, who knows if this pit is very healthy to eat, right? Like, density-wise. Like, it may be that it's more nutritious to eat than the actual fruit. Who knows? But that's another consideration to take with the stone fruits, because some of these cultivars will have pits that, tough as fuck, which is maybe great for storage of seeds and planting, but not great for someone trying to consume the fruit. right? So, important considerations to take. But this apricot could get 30 feet wide, 30 feet tall, so it'll be roughly a level 2 tree for me. It won't be in that third level getting super tall like a lot of the columnar cacti or the palms, which is great because I need a lot of level 2 trees, you know. Probably it's the trees you need the most, and then because they're going to give the most canopy and shade to the ground, and you know, you probably need less of the level 3 trees that are growing above that super high up, and then you probably need a lot more of the ground cover stuff, the trees, level 1 stuff, you know. So but yeah, we need a lot of these canopy covering trees. And also, a lot of these apricots, for instance, or stone fruit or fruit trees, they like being in really wet soils all the time, requiring at least steady irrigation, right? Well, this is a drought-tolerant apricot that likes well-draining soils, so it likes to be dry time to time. Perfect for what? We hear it 1,000 times, dry farming. So I'm banking on this guy taking 3 years of rainwater I collect in maybe just late spring or summer, and hopefully it'll establish itself and be able to live off the little monsoons and the little winter rains we get. So we'll see. But either way, I'm going to keep it alive because, as I said, some of these fruit trees, they go not only from being a farmed tree, but they're what I would consider as part of the homestead, right? So producing food for me. And like I said, I'm not going to be growing thousands of figs. I'm not going to be growing thousands of Chinese Mormon apricots. But these benefits I'm explaining to you, how they help your agave cactus, they can be beneficial, right? And it all helps each other out, you know. A lot of these trees, they're going to be putting in really profuse root systems, opening up the really compacted dirts here, giving more aeration and oxygen down into the soil, and soil microbiome affecting, you know, bacteria and fungi and all of that. And you know, it's not like a leguminous tree where it's going to be nitrogen fixating for you, but the fact that it can improve the water retention and oxygen availability and improve the soil for your agave and cactus, that's already a fucking win, dude. So, you know, the fig and apricot both do this. Most fruit trees do this, and it's something you know, you got to take into account. These bigger trees are going to be breaking up the soil so that your agave and cactus actually can put 3-4 foot deep roots down, right? Can't do that shit in soil compacted. Well, they probably can, to be honest, but it takes longer. So now, that would be the second tree. Wow, 48 minutes. Side notes always, huh? But see, as a consultant, this is why I like making these podcasts, because it's kind of like a historian, you know? They'd be like, why World War II start? It's like, dude, like, you gotta go back to like 1700 if you really want to know the whole fucking shebang, you know? But it's like, I'm trying to answer just, you know, a question: what are some fruit and leguminous trees that will help your agave and cactus farm, right? Real simple fucking question, and we're going to be over here probably talking for 2 hours about this shit, because there's so many little key facts and twists and turns that you want to at least know about so that you can be making the best decisions on your farm, right? So that's why consulting takes a lot of time. And every farm is so fucking different. I mean, I can go to the farm right next door to me. It's so different. Even on my own farm, there's different reasons, right? It's crazy. But yeah, going to these fruiting olives, right? So a lot of these fruiting olive trees that you'll buy will not come with IDs. But generally you can tell when it fruits what fruit it is. And I will say most of the trees in California are probably going to be arbequina, mission, Koroneki too is one a lot of people use for its really good oil. But generally, most of the olive trees except some of the early ones planted in California, are going to be very drought tolerant. So a lot of the olive tree varieties today now are, being bred from genetics from the Middle East and stuff, where a lot of the genetics prior that were coming into California, like in the early colonial times, were European Italian tree varieties that required a lot more water, right? So what I was trying to say is that I was thinking there for a second. Trees, for instance, like arbequina, much more drought tolerant than, for instance, a mission. And the mission olive, like, that's why they call it the mission olive, because it was the leading olive tree on the mission, right? So these were more water-loving varieties of olive, but if you want some that are more drought hardy, I will say Manzanillo has served very, very well for me here. Those are an olive tree from Sevilla, Spain. So they were called Manzanillas de Sevilla. So it's like saying little apples of Sevilla, basically, like if you translate it. And that, I don't know, like they kind of exaggerated. The olives are pretty large, way larger than a lot of the olives on most of the varieties, but they're not little apple sized. But that was the name they gave it. Once again, European cultivar, right? So these arbequina olives, they're from I'm trying to remember. Oh, Arbeta in Spain, which is in the Catalonia region, right? So Arbeta has like really tough soils and stuff, and people really rave about this olive oil tasting very like people say it tastes like kind of like peanut butterish, kind of nutty, kind of like some macadamia nuts and shit. But it's being grown a lot in California because of its drought tolerance, right? Over, like I said, varieties like Mission, right? Or stuff like that. But here's the thing. That's why you gotta choose the different varieties, right? Like I got some arbequina, and I grow those very much like you could say almost like a blueberry tree, where I know I'm gonna be keeping it 10 to 12 feet in height and spread, right? Or up to maybe 6, 8 in spread. Whereas the Manzanillo olives, they can basically get double the height. So they could be 30 feet tall, 15 foot to 20 foot spread. So different olive trees could be growing 2 or 3 times the size of other ones. So if you want some compact ones, maybe in between your agave and cactus, so you always, as you're harvesting, have some stuff in the field so you lower erosion and all of that. We've talked about that a lot. That's kind of what inspired me to get a lot of cactus in with my agave, because I harvested a whole agave field, and then the wind was just taking all my mulch and compost and all my shit away, and I was pissed. So by keeping trees, cactus, columnar cacti, these opuntias in with the agave, when you harvest the agave, you don't lose your fucking field's nutrients, which is great. So those smaller ones like the arbequina that I have, they're great for putting in between plants, They're going to help a lot. You could even plant the arbequina much like a hedge, You could have hundreds of them on say, here I get west winds going east. I could put them on my western fence line and have a hedge where I get olives that I harvest, right? And the olive oil, obviously, is the main reason that I'm trying to harvest or grow these olive trees, right? So, yes, they're very drought tolerant. Yes, they're very cold tolerant. The cold tolerant, though, you have to make sure that you choose a cultivar that is cold tolerant. not all the olive trees are cold tolerant to every area. So here in my area, as I mentioned, we get down usually in between 14 to 20 as the max lows in winter, depending on the year, right? So there's some varieties, like I told you, the Manzanillo, the arbequina, the sevillano. There's different olives that I have that they love the cold here, but other ones, not so much, I've tried lots of different olives and a lot of them died, so make sure to, that's the other thing too, if you try 2-3 cultivars of a type of fruit you like say olives or you like apricots, don't give up, because there's hundreds of cultivars of each of these trees, man. Don't give up, two other drought tolerant olives that I have not been able to find. One is one that's really highly prized called Koroneki. Koroneki is from like Greece, Turkey area, and then you have another one called Piccolini or Piccoline. I don't know exactly how to pronounce some of these. Piccolini is how I pronounce it, right? I don't know. But this is another one that a lot of people think is from France, because France cultivates it. But that's bullshit, bro. That's some colonialism bullshit. It's actually from Morocco. And they grow a fuck ton of it in Morocco. Which, if you remember, very high in cactus cultivation, man. These fucking Moroccans, they know what's up with the cactus, man. As a Mexican, I'd love to visit Morocco and go visit some cactus farms. But hopefully a polyculturist invites me, because if I go to a monoculture, I'm just going to be fucking complaining the whole time. It's like when contractors go out to eat. This is like the most hilarious shit. It's like I'll go to any restaurant and I'll just be looking at their electrical, their plumbing, their HVAC, their fucking flooring, like everything, and I'm just like, I need to get out this place. Like, everything's built wrong. That's just funny, man. And then there's other stuff that looks really bad built, because I build, I'm like, oh yeah, that guy was a crackhead, but that shit will last 100 years. There's really well built crap. That's the funny part always. But anyways, the Koroneki and the Piccolini, two extremely drought tolerant olives that I haven't really found out here, but when I do, I'm gonna try to get a few of them. But I've been looking for these olive trees. If anyone knows what the fuck they are, there's these olive trees that I had found in Pasadena that were like 80 feet tall. I don't know what the fuck they are, man, but there's some ginormous olive trees out there, and these guys give some giant fruits. I don't know if they're a cultivar that, in Pasadena, that's that old money, There, that home right there was over like 120 years old. Looked like some fucking what do you call it? Those mansions from the south, I forget already. But it looked like some slave owner owned that shit, man. I swear, California never had slaves, by the way. But, well, I won't say that, but history says California never had slaves, bro. And so this house had some really historic trees that were planted a long, long time ago in Pasadena, early Pasadena, when a lot of the wealthy Eastern Coast people started moving and building these super giant mansion, really beautiful garden, multi-acre properties in Pasadena. And I wonder what the fuck those olive trees are, because I want some 80-foot olive trees, man. The guy used to pay me all the time because he hated the olives. And then I was just like telling him, I'm like, dude, like, don't ever cut these down. Like, I know the guy that, one day, if you don't want to fucking, if you want to calm down, I know the guys that'll come take them out and save them, because this cultivar, I told him, I don't know what it is, but it's some shit, man. But anyway, the best ones I've probably seen on my farm are the Manzanillo, which I said are from Seville. But the more northern African, the more, east of the Mediterranean, the olive tree cultivar gets, the better it does here. So I'm trying to, find a lot of those varieties that are Maybe from the Middle East, maybe from Greece and Turkey that can be drought-tolerant. But anyways, so these olive trees, I want them so that I could press them into oil. And there's all these seed press machines that you could buy for like $150, $200. Some, to start out with, and you could press oil from all types of seeds, from your olive, from your cactus, tuna seeds. You could get them from I still haven't pressed agave seeds, but they're so shiny. I'm sure there's some oil in them, but my AI searched it and they said no oil. Who knows until somebody tries, right? But anyways, with a little seed oil press, you can make a bunch of olive oil. And here's the interesting part for agave processing. The tahona, if you're going to be making a tahona to process agave on your ranch, you could very easily adapt that to process olives on a large scale, right? And for agave, it's actually, like people say, like, oh, the tahona always limits the processing of those farms, right? But for olives, that's a fucking giant press for olives, dude. So, what would be small for the agave would actually be pretty significant for your olives. So, if you need to grind up your olives from time to time, squeeze the juice out, it would be a beneficial machine. They can use for 2-inch trees on the farm. The olive trees are a little bit less wind tolerant. I've been seeing drags out their leaves a bit on some of the cultivars, but the new ones that we're planting, they're different ones, so we'll see how they do in terms of that on the farm. I really am just interested in seeing the max potential of each of these cultivars, but I'm not even so sure that someone fucking planted 5 different cultivars on a small farm before, right? So ideally, I'd like to put all of the different drought tolerant olive varieties, and it's like agave. You have all the different olive oil flavors, right? That'd be dope. But we'll see where that goes. I just know that the olive tree, much like all the other benefits I've been describing, benefits the soil, locks in more oxygen, water retention capabilities, gives me microclimates to propagate young and medium-sized plants. It very, very significant trees, and I can find them for affordable rates, enough that I want to plant a good amount of them. But once again here, I would like to maybe have, ideally, 50 olive trees in the future on the farm, and we probably got a dozen, and you would, in an olive orchard, probably plant 50 olive trees an acre, right? But 50 olive trees worth of production is sufficient for me and my family to get rid of our olive oil bills and to sell a small scale, very high quality, traditionally indigenous knowledge based farm that olive oil. So, that I could get behind. I'm down. I'm not trying to be an olive oil producer, right? When I tell you to add trees in different stuff into your systems of agave, I don't want you to become an olive tree farmer as well, okay? I want you to have trees benefiting your agave and cactus that give you a little supplemental income, So it's like the agave and cactus, how I like to think of it, will maybe be the 50% of the farm, 60% of the farm, and another 40% will be hundreds of species that are all contributing to making those agave and cactus grow better, right? So choose a couple crops that you are going to be your main shebang, your fucking main homie, and then the other ones you just grow a little bit of, right? But that way you have adaptability, right? Say, like why I like this system in particular for me. I'm growing so many different agave varieties, right? Say somebody comes in and is growing one of these varieties at a massive scale, making me unprofitable on that variety. I just will go from growing that as a main variety to growing another of my ones as a main variety. So by keeping all of these other genetics around, you can always quickly scale that genetics out, right? Say you know, you want to suddenly start growing fig trees, and you got 10 fig trees. You take 1,000 fucking branches from your fig trees, and you start 1,000 fig trees, right? But you started that from a very small population. And that you can do all the time with any species. So the polyculture just allows you to adapt quickly and have the stock. I don't need to look for seed or bugle or clones from anyone else because I got that shit, you know? So it allows you to that's the greatest ability in farming, to be adaptable, right? Why farms go out of business as a consultant is very simple. They just don't adapt. You know what I mean? It's like they've had a system, some of them, 10, 50, 100 years the farm may have used this system and it works. The moment it doesn't work, that farm's in fucking peril or in trouble, right? So, yeah, being adaptable as a farmer is a luxury. Don't give it up for granted that you can, when you're safe, be adapting, because when you're not safe and you need to adapt, that's when you need the stock, that's when you need the plants, and nobody has them, and they're expensive. And you know, you got to be intelligent with what you plant. But anyways, yeah, the olive trees, really good, that we're continuing to put out here. I want to be able to produce a lot of oil, at least in scale for me, but we'll see where that goes. The olive trees in particular, say I had thousands of them, I would need a well. So it's not a tree that I would like to farm out like that, right? And here's the thing, like a lot of the olive orchards, right, they use a lot of irrigation because they're keeping little 15, 20-foot trees. If they had some 60-foot massive established olive trees, they wouldn't even need to water that shit, and they would produce. It might not produce every year the consistent quality they need, but you know what? Maybe that's what we need to stabilize prices, man, because it's like, you know, I give an example. They had a historic year of cultivation of almonds, and the almond price is on the floor. That should not be correlated. There should not be a historic growth of an industry being correlated with the historic lows. That's just, you know, I know supply and demand works that way, but it's like the farmers, you know, they're the ones that put themselves in these scenarios, man, I swear. We'll just go to the next one, man, because I don't want to stay on that one forever. So let's talk about the Punko. The Punko. So this is what they call the Mexican Palo Verde, a lot of people. And I really love this Mexican Palo Verde. You know, the Arizona Palo Verde, it has its leaves very like uniform, classic, you know. It's got like a bunch of little leaflets and stuff. Whereas the Punko, it looks like a little bunch of whips and shit. Its leaves, it's funny. It's just, especially in the wind, it's just like very wavy. It's so cool. But it has spikes, so that's why a lot of people don't like it. And they also nickname it the Jerusalem thorn for that reason, right? Because it's, you know, its thorns are pretty crazy. But here's the thing. The goats love that Palo Verde much more over the regular Palo Verde, right? Which is interesting to me. I don't really understand that. Maybe they're more nutritious. Maybe it has a different flavor. I'm not too sure. I just know they like it a lot more, right? And that's good because I've grown a bunch. So the Punko, or the Mexican Palo Verde, has been growing twice as fast as the Arizona Palo Verde, maybe even triple the speed. And its Latin name is Parkinsonia aculeata, I think. And this Palo Verde can get really tall. I've seen it even get up to 40 feet tall with maybe a 30-foot spread, you know. And these trees, much like every other fruit tree we've been talking about today, produce edible flowers. So you can eat the flowers, but much like all the other fruit trees we talked about as well, you don't want to eat all the flowers because then you won't get the fruit in this case, or the edible vine pods, right? So Palo Verde, much like mesquite, will produce little vines full of little beans, and those beans are very nutritious to eat. You can make powder out of it and make tortillas. You can make flour. You can bake and cook with it. You could just eat them raw like I do. You could sell them raw for people to utilize. You can, as I mentioned, ferment them with agave or cactus and make a Palo Verde or mesquite infused beverage. There's a lot of stuff you can do with those little bean pods. I always tell people, I'm like, the leguminous trees are just amazing. But this Palo Verde, much like all the other fruit trees, are serving in a silviculture system so that my goats can eat all of them and consume all of them and be able to supplement their food and forage from all of these trees, right? So the Punko is a very fast-growing one. I mean, some of these, in 1 year I planted them, they were like little 3, 4 foot, 5 gals, and then now some of them are like 10 footers with like a dozen branches. So a very fast-growing tree. I would recommend planting them early because they just grow so quickly, and as I said, that whole time they're growing, they're nitrogen fixating, much like a bean crop, ground cover crop, putting lots of nitrogen in the soil so that when you come around and put your agave and cactus, or if you're growing it right next to it, they're going to be getting that fertilization, right? Much like if it was applied with compost. And then all those plants are going to be growing better, right? So this tree directly influences, the speed, the health of your agave and cactus plants. So leguminous trees, the more you can have on your farm, the better. You're going to be, providing that little microclimate like we've been talking about from all of these trees. Those soil improvement potentials, right? And then they give you a good crop, right? And like I said, most of the fruit trees, the leguminous trees, money making traditionally has just been the fruit. But, that's very low density, like the fruit density wise compared to the leaf matter, the biomass of the tree is very low, right? You can produce a lot of, say, fruit for sale, right? But you can produce 20 times more biomass through the leaves for your goats to be fed. And they eat that, they turn it into compost. It goes right back to the tree, producing more leaves. It's like a continuous cycle of them creating more and more of their food, right? So you make more money with your goats, and you make more money on the trees. The leguminous trees, they're slept on, man. I'll just say that much. They're slept on. But I really like this Mexican Palo Verde over the Arizona one. As I said, it's much quicker growing. I'm prioritizing this one over the Arizona one now because the Arizona one, I can't find people that sell it affordably. You know what I mean? Like my homie, I won't tell you the price that he was hooking me up with them at, right? Because he sells them at a certain price, and I don't want to burn them. But the price that he's selling them at, which is $25, is still extremely fucking low. I mean, I've seen a lot of 5 gals in the LA region going for $80-100. So he's selling them at a fourth of the price. That's crazy, man. So I can get them for a fourth of the price, and they grow 2 to 3 times quicker. That means that I'm getting more nitrogen fixation. That means I'm getting more water in my soil. That means I'm getting more oxygenation in my soil, right? So once again, look at all the different cultivars. Don't just be like, oh yeah, I'm going to grow apples, and you just choose a random ass apple tree, right? Choose different cultivars because some will be better than others. My land, I've definitely seen the Mexican Palo Verde extremely outperform the American version. So I've given up on the American. I got the ones I got. I'm not going to buy more of them, and I'm just going to be putting more of the Mexican ones until I reach a point where I'm like, I should probably put some American ones to just give it some diversity of genetics, right? You don't want to put too much Mexican ones, because then what if you get a plague on them, right? So right now, in the beginning stages of the tree establishment, I want to get a lot of those Mexican Palo Verdes, and once I have a lot more shade cover and all that stuff, I'm going to be starting a lot more of the Arizona ones that I could take my time with later on in the farm, because right now I want fast-growing trees that are adding lots of soil amendment into my soil quickly, because I'm adding the agave and cactus already, right? And they're already growing. I don't want to be waiting for 5 years. For some of the agaves, in 5 years, they're already in and out. You know, the Punko at least is growing so quickly that I know it's helping the plants growing right next to it at the moment, right? Not in 3, 5, whatever the fuck years. So, not to hate on the Arizona Palo Verde, great tree, but the Punko, it's just really outperforming it. So that's the one we're sticking with for now, for the meantime. And yeah, later on when I get more money, more time, then we'll focus maybe more on some Arizona Palo Verdes, which are amazing trees as well. I didn't even know about the Mexican Palo Verde until my dad taught me about it, right? So it's like, that's why it's good to talk with other farmers and learn about different trees and shit, because I was telling him I really like the Palo Verde, and he's like, oh, we got one in Mexico too. And I was like, oh God, let me check it out. Checked it out, amazing tree, right? So now I grow a bunch of them. So those edible bean pods, they'll be a supplemental crop. Those we are going to be planting a fuck ton of. So if I have thousands of those later in the future, that's great, because they could all be dry farmed, producing me edible beans without irrigation, right? Just completely off the rain. So unlike the figs or the olives or the other stuff, they don't need supplemental rainwater. So I can focus all my captured rainwater on other plants, right? And they really do fit with the agave and cactus system, because those I never need a water either, right? So they're very much in the same type of maintenance system. And one thing I will say as well, that the Mexican Palo Verde in its early establishment years, say year 1 through 5, will benefit from supplemental water. So I just mentioned how it's not required, but it will benefit from a lot of supplemental water. And this is one thing I noticed with when Palo Verdes, people are putting them in a lot of drought-tolerant gardens and stuff, and then they'd be on automatic 3 times a week irrigation systems. There was a lot of plague, and a lot of them started rotting and dying. So, they didn't like the supplemental water like the Mexican Palo Verde does, right? I can, keep my Mexican Palo Verde dry farmed, and then say, I need to change all the water for the goats. I could go throw 20 gallons on it, it'll drink it all, and it's not going to die, and it'll help speed up the growth, right? So that is not the case with the Arizona Palo Verde. Supplemental water, a lot of it can really harm it, right? Especially if you're in already humid areas. So sometimes we'd get a lot of rain in like Santa Monica, Marina del Rey, those really coastal humidity areas in LA. And then those Palo Verdes immediately went to shit, because they were already heavy irrigated. And then with the rain, they were just sitting in straight water, and they didn't like it. They died. So something to watch out for with the Arizona one, even though it's a really great tree, I wouldn't have that issue here, because they got really well-drained soils. But in your area, NorCal, Coastal Cal, that could be an issue with the Palo Verde, right? It's amazing to have a drought-tolerant tree, but then if you just are in an area where you get an extreme amount of water at some point in time, it could just kill them. And I've seen various of them toppled because of shallow root systems as well when the floods come. So now, the Punko, it's one of my favorite trees. But now I want to talk about the other leguminous that I'm putting a lot of here with Nori, and it's the Chilean Mesquite, right? So Proposis or Prosopis chilensis, right? So that guy, or girl, whatever the fuck, that tree, very, very similar to the Mexican Palo Verde, fast grower, nitrogen fixator, drought tolerant, wind tolerant, poor soil tolerant. It can be in very alkaline soils, and it produces edible bean pods, right? So pretty much what I just said for Punko, same shit with mesquite, right? It's just going to be a very well performer. The mesquite as well, you can make flour, spirits from, you can make wine from, you can feed it in a silviculture, all of the leaves to your animals. So the Chilean mesquite, very, very drought tolerant once established. Probably never need to water it after maybe 6 to 8 feet in height, even in these areas, which is saying something. But it's a tree that I saw a lot of people were growing in the area, right? So a lot of the mesquite in the Lancaster area is Chilean mesquite, because not all the mesquite trees do well here because of the wind. And the wind just rips up some of these mesquite trees, right? So the Chilean is one that's more wind hardy, and it's one I'd recommend for high wind arid areas like here, right? Another plant I'm putting right next to a lot of agave and cactus so that it could be nitrogen fixating and helping those guys grow faster and more healthier. We put 2 15 gallons, and another tree that if you need to buy it affordably, go to Londa's. I mean, I've seen some of these going for like $200-300 in the greater LA region besides the Antelope Valley, which is crazy. Crazy, man. People, it's getting to the point where trees are just becoming for the rich, like, and I don't like it, to be honest, because if only rich people can afford trees, that means only rich people have shade, only rich people have clean air, only rich people have fucking the benefits that trees provide, man. So I remember when we started our garden in Manzanillo. Me and my dad would go buy $10-12 fruit trees at fucking Osh, and now you go try to buy a fucking citrus tree at Home Depot and it's like $80, and I'm like, for a small one that may die, and I'm like, oh man, come on, because for the average worker making fucking $15 an hour, right? He has to say, oh, I'm going to put up 6 hours of my labor to buy one fruit tree? Fuck, dude. Fuck. That's tough shit, man. That's tough shit. Most people aren't going to do it. They're going to try to put food on the table first. And that's a problem if not everyone can have a garden because the plants are so expensive, right? So as nursery people, farmers producing crops for the food system, I think about that shit all the time, and I'm like, I need to make my shit as affordable as can be, because that's the only way that poor and middle class can buy it, people already have a hard time affording houses, right? And that's, people all the time drive around LA, South LA, oh, nobody got fucking trees and shit. Dude, they can barely pay the mortgage. You think they're giving a fuck about a tree? Like, nope. But anyways, yeah, something to take into account. If you're only going to be buying a few of these trees for your farm, make sure, it might be a little bit better to take a drive out somewhere, even if it's not local, even if it's 100 miles away, because it may be way more affordable, right? And if you're in the LA region, I'd definitely recommend you taking a drive out to Londa's to get some affordable to fruit trees, because a lot of the areas are not affordable at all, and that's a sad thing. But yeah, Chilean mesquite obviously comes from Chile, but Chile is very it's got a lot of drought tolerant, dry farmed stuff out there. So mesquite kind of falls into that category, which is great. And it's a very, very fast growing mesquite. That's another reason I put it. It grows sometimes 2 to 3 times as fast as a lot of the other mesquite trees. And this is one tree. You don't want to be putting up against buildings or roads or anything. I put it literally in the middle of my field because it has some extremely beautiful trunk systems that form on it. That, the crazier the trunks are, once again, the crazier the water retention, the crazier the oxygenation of all the plants around there, the crazier of that fungi network that'll be under that tree and benefiting your farm. It's like, I in a city it may be a problem, but on a farm that's amazing. I want that shit. Like in the city we'd always be cutting roots of ficus trees and shit, and I always was like, this is horrible, this tree's gonna fall down. But those trunks on farms, let them go wild. They look so beautiful. Like, I love the ficus roots, on a 100-year tree where it's taking up the whole front yard, and it's like, it looks like a web of roots, like in fucking Vietnam or something, man. It's so beautiful. But, some people hate that. So, to each their own. But on the farm, I want to have some really nice architectural roots on the trees that I could be jumping around, or my kids later can. And, I think that's dope. But yeah, just something to, I caution you about. That it's very fast, and the roots are very fucking strong. And they can form these really beautiful trunks, like ficuses and stuff. But up against structures or roads and stuff, that could be detrimental. So while it can benefit your agave and cactus field, plant it in an area where it can grow crazy, right? And that's the thing too. People think they need to put, 1,000 trees in a 1 acre, right? Look at the max dimensions of all of these trees, right? So I'm telling you, this guy can have up to 40-foot spread and be 50-foot tall. Well, that means, I need to give him a lot of room in the fucking field, right? For it to grow to its max. And the better, or the more you don't trim a tree for its height and width, like say you're just opening up, right? So you can have fruit and light to each branch and have optimal vine or bean or fruit production, right? Well, that's going to allow the tree to be its best when it comes to dry farming. The larger it is, the more ability it has to store water, to store nutrients and everything across the year, right? And this has always been my argument for why the fruit orchard systems in California are ridiculous, dude, because, it would be much more beneficial to have, I'll give an example. They'll put 50, what do you call it? Let's give an example, almond trees, right? And they keep them, 15, 20 foot tall so that it could be easily harvestable by machine, right? Well, if they had a 60-foot almond tree and improve the shakers to be able to shake the whole fucking tree, they would have a much more drought-tolerant almond. Maybe they wouldn't need to apply 2 whole fucking acres of irrigation, to their operation every year to just maintain them alive, dude. But short, shallow trees, they don't have no roots, bro. So they can't absorb as much water, right? And people always said, oh, it's because of the labor, right? It's harder to harvest all these trees when they're tall and wide. I don't know, man. I just think everybody's a bitch, I think that there's ways to innovate and harvest those trees, and dates are a perfect example of that. There is no limitation on date trees in their width and height. They let them get max height and max width, right? And they're able to get optimal fruit production. Now, if they planted them too closely, where they couldn't get so high, grew all straggly, they didn't get sunlight, they were competing with each other, sure, the fruit production would probably be trash like it is on most fruit orchards. But I say all that because the Chilean Mesquite, just gotta give it some fucking room and let it grow to its max dimensions, Don't be over there trying to keep a big tree small. This is why, people are always like, they would tell me, Steve, why I need to trim my giant ficus hedge every month? I'm like, dude, your ficus wants to be a fucking 100-foot tree, and you're over here keeping it at 15 feet tall. Of course I have to come trim it every fucking month. It's like, Like, trees have max dimensions. You know what I mean? Listen to them and let them grow to that, so that they can be the most dry farm capable. Because if you just trim it to however you want, that tree's not going to have its best life. And that's definitely the case with Chilean Mesquite. One thing I will recommend with Chilean Mesquite, Mexican Palo Verde, all these fruit trees I'm describing today, they could get very tall and fall over in the winds. And a lot of times, you know, it's kind of what we were describing earlier in another podcast with agave. A lot of times, this is due to poor irrigation, right? Think about it. If a tree's watered 3 times a year, or 3 times a month, or my God, I'm being a dumbass right now, 3 times a week, and it knows I'm going to get some drip line, I'm going to get some sprinkler action, I'm going to get some bubbler action, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's literally how I'd program the clocks, or Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, right? And then it's like, okay, why the fuck am I going to put any roots deeper than the top 1 foot of soil, right? The top soil. Why? That's where all the water is. It comes every week, 3 times a fucking week. Now, in a dry farm system like mine, you best believe that motherfucker's putting down some deep roots, or he's not going to survive. You know? It's a different system. And you have to realize, if you want your trees not to fall over, you want to water them less, you want them to get established quicker, you want them to have deep roots to supplement your soils as best they can, stop fucking irrigating them all the time, right? You're weakening your plant by doing that. It's like a fucking kid, man. You know? You give a kid everything he wants, that motherfucker never has an incentive to do shit with his life. You know? That's just how it is. Same with the trees. Why the fuck am I going to put some deep roots down when you're giving me consistent water all the time? You know? It's like the tree becomes a drug addict, and it knows it could get it every fucking week, 3 times a week. It's never going to work anymore because it's just getting it all the time. Anyway, Chilean Mesquite, amazing nitrogen fixating tree, very, very drought tolerant. You know, highly recommend you to plant them. Now, the last tree we'll be talking about today is Pink Lady. Pink Lady is one of my favorite apples. Here's the thing, like we've been mentioning the whole podcast, like there's thousands of apples, dude. I know an apple farm up in Sonoma, right next to my boy Adam with Stargazer Spirits, right? And Ambic Spirits, that's their name, Ambic Spirits. So Ambic Spirits, I think they're growing 30 or 40 different type of apple trees. If you don't know about them, you can go visit. They have a tasting room, really sweet couple, wife and husband, super chill people, very knowledgeable, and very open to helping. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a newbie ass fucking distiller, dude. You know, and sure, I've made some good shit that other people like, but I don't consider myself an expert at all, dude. I'm just getting started, you know. But some of these guys, like Ambic Spirits, they've been in the game for a bit. You know, they're a little bit more established, already kind of trying to do what we're doing with agave, vertically integrated. They grow it, they fucking process it, they sell it, they market it. And I think they're a great example of what a small farm should be, right? Very diverse, very innovative, very ecologically minded, right? And little by little, you know, I hope more of these type of farms pop up, right? Like if you like agave, you got all the agave. You like cactus, you got a bunch of cactus. You like fucurella, you got a bunch of fucurella. You like apples, you got a bunch of apples, right? All the apple trees up in Washington, I mean, they probably got a couple varieties, but there's none of them that got 100 apple trees, you know? Well, who knows? Never saying that. But anyways, Pink Lady apple tree. So this Pink Lady, like most of the fruit or the apples, is very cold hardy. They're cold hardy to -10 to -20 Fahrenheit. And I've seen lots of them in the greater LA area growing in areas where it gets 115, 120. So it seems that they're very heat hardy. Not sure on their wind hardiness yet. As I said, newer trees, we'll see how they do. I've had Anna apples here before that I grew successfully and then sold them to clients. So I know Annas do well. Anna, I stayed away from this time because it's a little less drought tolerant than, a little less cold tolerant. But Pink Lady is a little less drought tolerant than Anna. So maybe later we'll mix it up with some Annas. But for now, I wanted to get a Pink Lady. And that's the tree me and Nori chose. But anyways, Pink Lady, amazing, really good fruit. And one thing you gotta watch out for Pink Lady. Remember how I was telling you how the Chinese Mormon apricot, they could take late frost and stuff. Well, Pink Lady can't, So Pink Lady is susceptible to late frost. So you may want to frost tarp them if you get a late, frost in early spring or something, But not a problem for me. Used to it, growing a lot of vulnerable agave species already. But if you're growing Pink Lady, just remember, doesn't like late frost. But really good apples, as I mentioned, very, very sweet, great for dehydration, great for making, cider, great for making snacks and stuff. I like eating them with just some agave syrup, like chopped up and shit, really good. But again, every apple tastes way different. The Anna apple tree produces a larger cluster of them, more closely spaced, but they're much smaller. Pink Lady's a lot larger. But the Anna apple, as I mentioned, very drought tolerant. One thing I didn't like about it so much was the taste. It was a little bit more drier, not as sweet. So hopefully Pink Lady solves a bit of the problems I had with Anna, even though I still haven't given up on Anna apple trees and I want to get some later. But remember always with the fruit trees too, you can, say you got a small garden, you can put 10 different apple trees on one apple tree. You can put 10 different apricots on one apricot tree. I don't know if I've ever mentioned on the podcast the tree of 40, which is a tree that was, they put 40 different fruit and nuts on it. You get me? And honestly, the limits are endless. You could probably have a fucking tree with like 200 fucking cultivars on it, right? If it's got the branch space. I mean, and this tree of 40 was able to harvest in, I think, 3 different seasons, like almost the whole year. It was amazing. But, even if you only want to have a few apple trees on your farm, you can make them 5-in-1s, 10-in-1s, 3-in-1s. I actually have seen some 3-in-1s at nurseries nowadays. So why not start out with a 3-in-1 apple tree too, right? The problem with that sometimes is not the 3 you want. So I really like Pink Lady. I really like, let's see. I don't like Fuji. I don't like Gala. I don't know. I mean, there's lots of apple trees that don't come to mind right now, but they're much smaller, but much sweeter than a lot of the shit in the market, right? A lot of the stuff on the market, because they sell it to you by pound, they want it to be like the biggest apples, right? But the problem with that is usually those are like the quote-unquote nastiest apples to me, right? Because they're not sweet at all. You bite into them and it feels like you just bit into some fucking like wet-ass cardboard. Like, I don't want that, man. And here's the other thing too, with growing all the fruit trees on your farm or your homestead, right? They're going to be much more fresh. And one thing I would always complain about, it's like, one, I couldn't even get figs or olives or loquats in the farm or in the store because people don't sell them. But the other thing is, dude, I would go and bite into a mandarin from my tree. Oh my god, the best mandarins. I miss them so much. Fucking SoCal Edison. But anyways, I go buy mandarins all the time at the store. Fuck, are they trash? Oh my god, dude, the worst flavors ever. It's pretty sad. Like, even, cuties, for all the fucking marketing they have. Holy shit, do they taste horrible compared to a tree harvested one, right? And I will say, it's not always their fault. They're harvesting it earlier so it gets to you. I understand agricultural economics and shit. I'm just saying that it doesn't taste nothing close to the shit that you'll get when you pick it, right? And it's great to have both options, right? Because obviously your tree runs out, and these fuckers, they got giant networks where they freeze it the whole year, and you can buy it the whole year, right? Like a lot of the times, the apples you're buying in store were from last year. They just stored them in a freezer in Washington or Oregon. So take that into account. You know, you want higher quality, better tasting stuff, grow that shit. Because it's not available. Even if you pay the best prices, you're just not going to get it. You know, that's why farmers markets are having more popularity now, right? Because you could just roll up, pick up some shit they picked at 5 a.m. that day. But, you know, another complaint behind farmers markets I'm having a lot is just that I wish that they made a rule at every farmer's market, you can only sell what you grow. Because a lot of farmers markets now have just become reseller points, which is ridiculous. No point. The whole point of the farmers market is to give the small farmer a fucking chance to go up against corporations. And now you're trying to resell corporation crap? Come on, man. It's like the whole Cisco scam, you know? Every restaurant says how unique they are and shit. 90% of restaurants all get their fucking ingredients from Cisco. How different can you really be if you're using all the same ingredients? You know? Because at the end of the day, how do you differentiate yourself there? Right? Like, you can't really. Yeah, you can't. I mean, you know, you can't do it, dude. You can't do it, no matter how much they try. But, you know, always going on tangents. Pink Lady, fucking drought tolerant, but it's still an apple tree. You're going to have to irrigate it a little bit. So I'm not going to be putting dozens or hundreds of them, but I'd like to have, you know, 3 or 4 little Pink Lady trees that I know I gotta take some of my captured rainwater and irrigate them a little bit once in a while. And I'm fine with that because they're great tasting fruits, right? That I can't really buy in the store. So I'm fine with it. You know, you can't win always in life, and you gotta take your battles, right? And with the Pink Lady, I'm fine irrigating a little bit more for its bomb-ass fruit. So Pink Lady also is a smaller size fruit tree. So a lot of apple trees can be, you know, 60, 80 feet tall, some of these fuckers, especially the pears. But this one only gets 15 to 20 feet tall. So it's going to be level 1, pushing level 2 canopy, providing some nice low microclimate for your ground cover, your low young plants, while still, you know, giving some vertical aspect or you know, to the farm. But once again, I didn't want giant apple trees that I was going to have to, heavily irrigate in the beginning of their life. So I'm okay with this drought-tolerant one being a little bit smaller. Like with the apple trees, you have to realize most of them aren't going to be, like the ones that are drought-tolerant, like Pink Lady, they aren't going to be drought-tolerant until they're established, right? So I know the next 3 years I'm going to have to irrigate it a little bit. But I know after those 3 years, if I maintain it at its max sizes, it's not going to need to be irrigated all the time, which is great. So once again, choosing your apple trees, you want to make sure that, or whatever fruit tree, leguminous, nut tree, that it's a tree that ideally can be established with time. It's fine, like even with some of these agaves, right? If you have to water them a little bit more in their first 2-3 years, that's fine, as long as they're establishing, right? Because say that agave takes 15 years, but at the end of year 2.5, it's established and you don't need to water it anymore, but you watered it for 2 years a little bit every once in a while, that's fine, dude. You got 18 years of dry farm there. or 13, right? If it was a 15 year, but 18 if it was a fucking 20 year, which some agaves are. So, point is, it doesn't have to be dry farm 100%. You know, this is the other thing where dry farm can the meaning can fluctuate, right? Because a plant can start off not being dry farmed and end its life being dry farmed. And in 99% of its life, it would have been dry farmed, right? Olive tree would be a great example of that, where olive tree could potentially live, say a 200, no, better example, 300-year-old olive tree, right? Say it took you 3 years to establish that olive tree to a good size where it could live off of very little rainwater, right? Okay, that fucker lives 300 years, right? That would have meant that over 99% of its life, it grew dry farmed. Now, is people really going to look 300 years from now and say, oh, it wasn't dry farmed because the first couple of years was fucking irrigated? No, dude. Nobody gives a fuck. The goal is to fucking make it dry farmed, not to start off dry farmed. Nothing is, nobody starts off strong as fuck, but you can make someone strong as fuck. That's how you got to think about dry farm, right? But anyways, Pink Lady apple tree, one that I'm really excited about here on the farm. And yeah, just the recap there. We had the Pink Lady apple, we had the mystery fig, we had the Chinese Mormon apricot, we had the Punko, which is Mexican Palo Verde, which is Parkinsonia aculeata. We had the the Chilean Mesquite, right, which is Prosopis or Proposis, whatever the fuck, I forget how it's arranged. And so those trees are what we've recently planted here in January. And these trees, by the end of March, most of them will be already significantly established. The Punkos, planting them in summer, I planted many of them, and by the end of fall they were established. Many of them are giants now. So even those I'm very excited for, because I know by March they're already going to be established. The mesquites, I would assume so as well. I'm thinking it's probably going to take a year or so for the apple and fig and stuff to become a little more established to where I won't have to be watching them all the time. So likely, for example, Pink Lady and the fig and stuff and the apricot, I'm going to be watering weekly in the summer with rainwater that I've captured in the winter. And I'm going to be watering, then dropping them as they grow to every 2 weeks, to every 3 weeks, to every 4 weeks, to every 6 weeks, to every 8 weeks. And eventually training them like I do with my agave. We talk about that a lot, how I'll bring in agave that I harvest from a agave flower stalk, and then sure I'll water them the next few days, and then eventually I get to a point where even in the shade house I'm watering them once every 3 months. So train your plants over time to be more drought tolerant. Like Pink Lady, for instance, is a one that people say, some people say is drought tolerant, others don't. And I've always said that's really having to do with the gardener, because you know, drought tolerant isn't something you just buy, dude. You know, if somebody gives you drought tolerant fucking fig tree, right? You go buy that at the store and you water it 3 times a week, it's no longer drought tolerant, bro. Right? You're gonna have to retrain that fucker. Which, you know, it gives some positive notes though, because that means you can make every plant more drought tolerant. But that also means you can make every drought tolerant plant less drought tolerant if you're not careful, right? So that's what I tell people to watch out for, you know, when you're dry farming, that you don't want to be irrigating sufficiently enough that they don't put down deep and long roots, especially in these high wind areas. That's why a lot of these Palo Verdes have been knocking over in city medians and stuff, because they're watered often. They don't have really good root systems because they're right up against the roads and stuff, and they're really compacted soils because they're just in one little spot. But anyway, hope you learned something today. These are some of the trees we're putting down on the farm to grow in tandem with our agave and cactus, and we know is going to help grow those better. And use this podcast as a little inspiration for seeing, what leguminous trees can I put? What drought-tolerant fruit trees can I put? And see what works with your homestead goals, what works with your small farm polyculture goals, what works with your diet goals, what works with your water needs, what works with your
ecosystem needs, right? So, be very selective when choosing trees. I would say that much, right? Not to say that you want to just fucking deny every tree unless it fucking fulfills every requirement of you, but researching every tree, at least when you're in the nursery, the least you can fucking do is Google every single cultivar that you're about to buy and learn the max dimensions, the cold hardiness, if it has heat hardiness, is a good wood wind, is it self-fertile? Those little things, man. You don't need to know the whole fucking blueprint and history of the tree, but you need to know enough to whether, can I successfully grow this on where I live, right? Because you'd be amazed at how much plants are just planted and people have no fucking idea what they're doing and everything just dies, right? And it's sad because, there's a lot of money being spent in the gardening and landscaping trade, right? Like, there's over 100,000 landscapers in the United States. That's crazy, bro. I mean, every property needs some gardening, some property maintenance. But the point is, on your farm, don't be like everyone else. Don't just go spend a bunch of money and have all your shit die. If you're going to go make an investment to get a couple trees, a couple fruit, a couple leguminous, even with agave and cactus, make sure you're planting shit that's going to work. I've said it 1,000 times probably already on this podcast. Don't be the fucking dumbass that goes by from a big agriculturalist here in California, 10,000 agave tequiliana, spends 100,000 in setting this shit up, $250,000, $500,000, and everything fucking dies on year 2 because you didn't do your fucking research, brother. Don't blame the consultant. That's your fuck up. That's your fuck up. I'll tell you right now. Don't even get mad at the fucking nursery that basically scammed your ass, because you let yourself get scammed, bitch. You didn't do the research. I won't get scammed like that. If a nursery told me, I go up to nursery, I'm like, hey, I need 10,000 agave, what you got? And they're like, boom, I got this agave tequiliana. It could live perfectly for you. My response next would be, do you know any other nurseries where I could drive to? Because you obviously don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So don't let people fucking scam you, dude. Do your research, know your plants a bit, so when you go looking, they can't get you like that. They ain't gonna, your investment is gonna go far. It's gonna actually matter because the stuff you put is gonna prosper. But yeah, anyway, have a great rest of the day, y'all. Go plant some fucking trees. Earth Day's coming up in April, and enjoy your life. You know what I mean? Plant some stuff that makes as they say, make some shade that the next generation could sit in, But yeah, hope you learned something. Have a good one. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out, y'all.